Hey guys, tonight we're pulling back the velvet curtain on one of the strangest mass arrests in human history. No warning, no trial. Just a quiet knock at dawn, and then, gone. The Knights Templar. Those infamous warrior monks cloaked in white and marked with a blood-red cross, vanished as if the earth had opened up beneath their feet and swallowed them whole. And you, lucky you, get to walk right into that moment. Or rather, shuffle in with a blanket, half asleep, clutching a warm mug and wondering if the dog locked eyes with a ghost again. You won't survive this night, by the way. Just emotionally. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Paris. The air is thick with wood smoke and suspicion. It's October 13th, 1307. A Friday, though no one's invented the superstition yet. Not until after this day. The streets are quiet, unsettlingly so. You might imagine the clopping of horses echoing faintly in the mist, but really it's more muffled than that. Like hooves wrapped in cloth, purposeful, secretive, you round a corner and then you see it. Royal guards, dozens of them, surrounding a Templar house. Not a castle, not a fortress, just a modest urban building. But the men inside? They wear the cross of Jerusalem on their chests and silence in their eyes. By midday, every Templar in France, every single one, is behind bars. From the Grand Master to the humble foot soldier, and not a soul knew it was coming. Not the Pope, not the people, not even the Templars themselves. So what in heaven or hell just happened? You drift backward in time, as if sleepwalking through history. And you land in the thick of a conspiracy so deep, even the documents that survive speak in whispers. You see, the Knights Templar weren't just knights. That's like calling Google just a website. No, these guys were a global operation. Monks with swords, bankers in armor, spiritual warriors, sure, but also landowners, moneylenders, castle hoarders, and quite possibly secret keepers. Founded around 1119 in the wake of the First Crusade, the Templars were formed to protect Christian pilgrims heading to Jerusalem. Sounds noble enough, right? But that job was just the cover letter. Within a century, they were one of the most powerful organizations in Europe. Think private army meets multinational corporation, with a sprinkle of divine immunity. And they made enemies. Kings owed them money. Popes feared their independence. Regular folks didn't know what to think. The Templars answered to no kingdom. Only the Pope could command them, and even then, barely. They built their own castles, minted their own coins, and might have developed a banking system so advanced, it makes some modern governments look like they're doing math on napkins. You lean closer, can almost hear the coins clink behind locked cellars. Now zoom in on one man, King Philip IV of France. A man who believed in two things, his divine right to rule, and the fact that his treasury was emptier than a bakery after, a snowstorm. He owed the Templars a fortune, thanks to all the wars and wigs. Okay, maybe not wigs yet. And he hated that these monks had more influence than he did. What do you do when you owe someone too much money? Well, if you're a 14th century king with a chip on your shoulder, you make the debt disappear, along with the creditor. So Philip played his cards in secret. Quiet meetings, dark corridors, forged confessions, the kind of stuff that makes spy thrillers look tame. And then, on that Friday morning, his trap snapped shut. Over 2,000 Templars were arrested in a single coordinated operation. Across cities, villages, rural outposts, even the quietest commanderies tucked in vineyards. Gone, as if wiped off the map by an invisible hand. No war, no battles, no time to scream. Just chains and silence. You might ask, but didn't anyone protest? Didn't. Someone say, hey, these guys were heroes in the Crusades. Well, sure. But by 1307, the Crusades were yesterday's news, and rumors had started to swirl. Accusations of devil worship, blasphemy, spitting on the cross, kissing each other in places that make medieval monks blush. Some of the charges were absurd, like worshipping a disembodied head named Baphomet. And yet, these very stories helped justify the takedown. Did people believe it? Some did. Others just looked the other way, distracted by bread prices and the plague whispering on the horizon. You know, typical medieval things. And the Pope? Pope Clement V. He didn't even know it was happening. Not until after. He was, shall we say, gently persuaded by King Philip to support the arrests, possibly with some polite threats and an army outside his door. Historians still debate whether the Templars were truly guilty of anything beyond being rich, powerful, and inconvenient. Many now believe the entire operation was a setup, a heist disguised as a heresy trial. And maybe that's why it still haunts us, because that night when the arrests came, there was no grand battle, no last stand, just cold, calculated erasure. You picture it now, a man in armor awakened by a knock. No time to pray, no sword in hand, just confusion, shackles, a room that grows smaller with each step away from freedom. And somewhere in that silence, you feel it. The sense that something massive has just slipped beneath the surface of history, not dead, just hidden. You shiver, though the blanket is warm. Some say that even as they were led away, the Templars never broke their code. That their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, stared into the flames years later and cursed those who wronged him. That curse, they say, still echoes in the halls of the Louvre and the alleys of Paris, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now you sit in the flickering shadow of that Friday. The streets are still, the guards have moved on, and the Templars, gone, in a night. The air still holds the echo of that night, the clanking of chains, the low murmurs behind stone walls, the distant chiming of church bells that nobody hears anymore. You haven't left Paris. Not really. You're just floating above it now, following the wake of men who used to be untouchable. You glide through time like a ghost on tour. Downward, into stone corridors where torches flicker against damp walls, where the smell of fear mixes with the mold in the mortar. The Templars, men who had once commanded armies and stood at the right hand of kings, now crouch on straw mats, their white mantles stained with dust and shame. But fear not. You won't get your cloak dirty. You're just observing. Though, let's be honest, you've started curling your toes under the blanket just in case the cold from that dungeon floor tries to creep in. It is now late October 1307. King Philip's plan is unraveling just as tightly as he wound it. At first, things seemed easy. Arrest, accuse, condemn. But even the best schemes run into that one pesky ingredient. People, and people. Well, they talk, under torture, of course. It wasn't long before the whispered stories began trickling out of the prisons. The same lines repeated over and over. That the Templars denied Christ, that they spat on the cross, that they kissed one another during bizarre initiation rites, that they worshipped an idol, sometimes a bearded head, sometimes a black cat, sometimes a creature too strange to name. Strange how pain makes everyone confess to the same bedtime horror stories, isn't it? Some of the confessions made almost no sense. Others were so detailed, it was as if they had been written in advance. Imagine that. You walk past one cell. A knight sits there, face swollen, fingers broken. He has confessed to everything, and yet his eyes, those eyes are clear, like glass that sees through you. That's the part the interrogators hated most. Not the lies or the silences, but the calm. And here's the twist. Some of the men didn't break. A few Templars refused to say anything, even when the screws turned, even when the coals hissed beneath them, and those were the ones who scared the king the most. Because silence under torture, that smells a lot like innocence, or loyalty to something deeper than the crown. Now, you float upward, to the courtrooms above. That's a generous word. Courtroom. More like heavily decorated. Echo chambers, the trials were a circus. Inquisitors led the questions like conductors, and the accused performed with bleeding hands. And what a script they were working from. Heresy, sodomy, idol worship, you name it. If the Templars sneezed in the wrong direction, it was a sin. One man, a veteran of the Crusades, was condemned because he looked indifferent during Mass. Another was asked to describe an idol that may not have existed, but the Inquisitor had drawn it already, just to help his memory along. You pause here, floating in the stale air of that chamber. The parchment rustles. A scribe dips his quill. The bishop yawns, and somewhere behind the closed doors the king smiles, because this isn't about truth. It's about narrative, control, turning holy warriors into monsters, just convincing enough to justify their destruction. Still, people whispered. Not everyone believed the Templars were guilty. Some said the whole thing was a money grab. Others claimed it was a power struggle. A few even suggested that the Templars knew something buried deep, a secret so vast, the church itself trembled. What could it be? Some said the Holy Grail, others, ancient scrolls, a treasure hoarded beneath Solomon's temple. And a few believed the Templars had seen too much in the East, learned things that didn't align with Christian dogma. Things better left buried in sand and silence. You drift out now, beyond the dungeons and palaces, to the countryside. There, away from the capital, other Templars have heard the news. Some go into hiding, others flee, and some just vanish. One commandery in western France is found abandoned, a warm stew still on the hearth. In Spain, a group of knights ride into the hills and are never seen again. In England, the arrests are slow, reluctant. The king there isn't as eager to play Philip's game. And in Portugal, well, they simply rename the Templars. Same knights, new branding, problem solved. It's clear now, this purge was political theater, but it has teeth. Back in France, interrogations continue. Hundreds of knights rot in cells, waiting for a verdict that's already been written. Some recant their confessions and are burned for it. Others go quietly, heads bowed, muttering prayers that echo strangely through the centuries. And still, no treasure has been found, no golden idol, no pagan statue, just ashes and silence. A curious thing happens during these months. While the king struts and the Pope shuffles papers, the legend of the Templars begins to grow. The more they are condemned, the more mysterious they become. And mystery, you know, is stronger than any sword. By early 1308, the Pope decides to take over the investigation himself. Perhaps he senses something isn't quite right. Or perhaps he just wants to clean up Philip's mess. He sends out orders. Let the trials be fair. Let the torture end. But it's too late. The damage is done. The stories are out there, breeding like rumors in a school hallway. And you're still floating, still watching. The firelight dims in the cells. The ink dries on the parchments, but your mind keeps spinning, like a carousel that forgot to stop. Why did the Templars confess? Were they broken by pain, or was something darker at play? Did they truly worship Baphomet, or was Baphomet just a name scribbled in the margins of fear? Historians still argue about it, of course. Some say the confessions were false, extracted by cruelty. Others wonder if the Templars had their own secrets, rituals and knowledge passed, down in whispers. Not evil, just different, ancient. You roll onto your side now. The blanket wraps a little tighter. The hum of your fan seems softer. Outside your window, the streetlights flicker like distant torches. And in your mind, the Templar symbol glows faintly red, like a cross drawn in embers. The trials aren't over yet. The world hasn't moved on. But you're drifting now, slowly, deeper, and the secrets, they're not buried, they're waiting. The candles are almost out now. Just a little glow flickering at the edge of your vision like a memory refusing to die. You're not in the dungeon anymore, but you're not free either. You're in the spaces in between, the shadows where decisions are made without witnesses, where history changes shape before it ever touches parchment. It's 1308, the year after the great arrests. You feel the kingdom holding its breath. France is quieter now, but it's the kind of quiet you get after a scream. Still buzzing, still haunted. The knights of the temple haven't all been burned, not yet, but their order is bruised, trembling, like a candle about to go out. You hover over papal parchment, watch the ink dry on a name that no one will dare speak aloud without checking over their shoulder first. Clement V, the Pope who had once called the Templars defenders of the faith, now finds himself the middleman in a political chess game. And you know what they say about pawns: expendable, especially when trapped between a king and the truth. You drift beside him, watching as he debates, prays, pauses. He's not a monster. No, Clement is just a man stuck in a chair much too big for his conscience. He sees what Philip is doing, but he also sees what disobedience might cost. Imagine trying to outmaneuver a king who controls your purse, your people, and your enemies. So Clement does what many do when they're cornered. He delays. He sets up commissions, sends letters, gives just enough pushback to appear noble, but not enough to challenge the storm. He even meets with some of the Templars himself, secretly, quietly. And here's the strange part. He believes them. Most of the knights who stand before him don't beg. They don't scream. They speak plainly. They deny the charges. They look him in the eye. And more than once, Pope Clement V is reported to have wept. But weeping doesn't change much when you're pope in name and hostage in practice. Now you glide over to a place called Chinon, a quiet corner of France that suddenly becomes the eye of a very strange hurricane. In June of 1308, 5 high-ranking Templar officials are imprisoned there, including Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master himself. He's a stoic figure, tall, white-bearded, not quite as old as he looks, not quite as defeated as you might assume. There's a hush in the air, and then the thing happens. The Chinon parchment, a document few would know about for centuries, is signed. In it, these 5 Templar leaders confess. Again. But here's the twist. They are absolved. The Pope forgives them. Not because they're guilty, necessarily, but because they repented. Sort of. It's messy, conflicted, full of legal wiggle room and theological tap dancing. Think of it like saying, you're not innocent, but you're not evil either. Just confused, maybe a little naughty. And then Clement seals the parchment, locks it away, and says nothing. Why? Because the world's not ready to hear that maybe, just maybe, the Templars weren't the demons Philip said they were. Admitting that would mean questioning a king, a war, a system. And that, as you can imagine, is not how you get to keep your hat or your head. So, instead, Clement does the one thing he can do without causing war. He calls a council. You watch as he sends out invitations like wedding announcements to the elite of Europe. Bishops, abbots, power players in robes. The idea is to gather them in Vienne by 1310 and let the church, not the king, decide the fate of the Templars. It sounds fair, doesn't it? But you're already smirking, because you know what happens when you give people time and space to plan, especially kings with old debts and sharper ambitions. While the church prepares to deliberate, Philip turns up the heat. More torture. More propaganda. More trials in cities where the verdicts are written before the trials even start. In Paris, dozens of knights are retried. And this time, when they deny the charges, they're burned alive in public. Not for what they did, but for daring to change their testimony. You lean in closer now. You can almost hear the crowd, feel the heat, see the way the flames reflect off stone walls like dancing ghosts. And through it all, Jacques de Molay remains locked away, waiting for justice, waiting for a council that keeps getting delayed, and somewhere along the way, you get the creeping sense that history isn't being written, it's being choreographed. Behind closed doors, the Pope and the King keep talking. Clement wants moderation. Philip wants erasure. The Templars are just symbols now, used to make points, to send warnings, to clean up royal debts. And here's your strange fact of the night. Before the Purge, the Templars were one of the largest banking powers in Europe. They held royal treasuries, funded wars, transferred gold across continents. Some say Philip was deep in debt to them. Some say he saw their wealth and panicked. Some whisper that it wasn't just about heresy. It was about balance sheets. Money. It always comes back to money. By the time the Council of Vienne finally gathers in 1311, the Templar order is a rotting corpse held up by robes and memory. And yet, during the council, something astonishing happens. Several members stand up for the Templars, Not everyone is convinced of their guilt. Some bishops argue for rehabilitation. Others point out the absurdity of the charges, how easily they crumbled under scrutiny. But just as the council is gaining momentum in favor of the knights, guess who shows up? King Philip. Not just in spirit, in person with an army camped outside. He enters the council like a judge at a rigged trial. He demands the Templars be disbanded immediately. He brings evidence. He twists arms. He makes threats. And Pope Clement, that soft, weary man in white, finally gives in. In March 1312, he issues a papal bull, Vox in Excelso. With this, the order of the Knights Templar is officially dissolved. Not condemned, not declared heretical, just dissolved. Like sugar and wine, a neat little vanish, legal and bloodless on paper. But you and I both know that kind of silence screams the loudest. And as you float there, high above the crumbling council chamber, one thought clings to you like smoke. What if they weren't guilty? What if the church knew it? What if all of this, the arrests, the trials, the torture, was just a theater for fear and greed? Historians still debate it, of course. Some say the Pope was protecting the church from civil war. Others say he folded under pressure. A few wonder whether he simply wanted the secrets of the Templars to stay buried. But one thing is clear. Power can kill truth. And sometimes it doesn't even need a sword to do it. Now your breath slows. The flames from those public burnings flicker behind your eyelids. The council's echoes fade into the distance, and the question lingers. When a holy order is erased, not for what they did, but for what they might have known, where does their truth go? Into vaults? Into legend? Or maybe into dreams? The stars have shifted above you now. A new night, a colder one. The fire from the last tale has gone out, but its smoke still clings to your breath. You're back in Paris, 1314. The city is quiet, unusually so, as if it too is waiting for something final, something irreversible. And in the heart of that waiting stands a man, shackled, exhausted, and still unbroken. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar. He's no longer a warrior. Not in the way the world once knew him. He's older, grayer. His skin bears the stains of prison walls and betrayal. But beneath all of that, beneath the bruises, beneath the years, there's still a spine made of iron and silence. You follow him now, step by step, through the stone corridors of the Conciergerie, that cold medieval fortress where time forgets to move. He's been here for 7 years. 7 long years of trials, interrogations, and solitude. He's confessed. He's recanted. He's confessed again. The script has changed so many times that even the church seems unsure which version it wants to believe anymore. But one thing is certain. Jacques de Molay knows something. Or at the very least believes something, so deeply, so fiercely that he's about to gamble his life on it. You watch the final act unfold under the shadow of the Pont Neuf, the oldest bridge in Paris. The date is March 18th, 1314. A platform has been built on a tiny island in the Seine, Ile des Juifs, the island of the Jews, so named for earlier executions that painted its soil with silence. 2 men are brought forth. One is Jacques, the other is Geoffroy de Charnay, another Templar, commander of Normandy. Both had been promised mercy, forgiveness, a quiet ending. But something's different this morning. The air is sharp. The people are whispering. The king's men are ready, but nervous. Something unscripted is about to happen, and they feel it like a chill down their spines. A crowd gathers, not for entertainment, for prophecy. And then Jacques speaks, not with anger, not with fear, but with fire. He denies everything. Again. He declares the Templars innocent. He declares his own innocence. He says the order was betrayed, not by heresy, but by cowardice and greed. And then he does something no one expects. He turns his head toward the royal palace, and with a voice that cuts through the river's wind, he calls upon God, not to save him, but to judge his enemies. He curses Pope Clement V. He curses King Philip IV. He says calmly, as if stating a fact, that within 1 year, both of them will stand before the divine court of justice. And then, without another word, he walks to the stake. They tie his hands. They wrap him in ropes. They light the fire. He does not scream. The flames rise quickly, fueled by tar and fear, and for a moment, the sky darkens, not from smoke, but from the weight of what just happened. Because here's the thing, curses don't belong in history, books. They belong in legends. But this one works. Exactly 1 month later, Pope Clement V dies. Of disease, they say, of stress, of divine coincidence. His body is buried far from Rome, under a whisper. And just 7 months after that, King Philip IV, Philip the Fair, the man who hunted the Templars like wolves, suffers a sudden stroke while out hunting. He dies shortly after, still in his prime. No warning, no war, just gone. And the kingdom begins to unravel. Philip's sons die one after another. His lineage collapses into what historians now call the curse of the Capets. France, once unified under his iron will, fractures. Wars begin. Thrones change hands. The 100 Years' War creeps into view like a plague on horseback. And through it all, people keep whispering about Jacques de Molay, about his eyes, his silence, his final words. They say that when the fire touched him, he didn't cry out, that he looked directly into the crowd and smiled, that the sky turned red for just a second, as if it too felt shame, and so the man they tried to erase becomes immortal. Not in body, but in myth. Even today, if you walk that bridge in Paris, they say you can still feel the heat on the wind. Not warmth, heat, like a judgment that never finished burning. You begin to wonder now, what secrets did Jacques de Molay take with him? Did he know something more than betrayal? Was there a treasure? A secret archive? A map? Or was the real treasure the idea of the Templars, a society of warriors sworn to poverty, loyalty, and silence, untouchable by kings, answering only to God, a threat not in strength, but in purity? Maybe that's what made them dangerous, because men who can't be bought must be destroyed, or else they become something far worse than rebels. They become symbols, and symbols don't die in fire. They spread. You've seen it. The Red Cross, the White Mantle, the whispers in conspiracy books, the thrillers, the Da Vinci codes, the rumors of Templar treasure hidden beneath Rosslyn Chapel, or buried in the foundations of Washington, D.C. It's absurd. It's romantic. And yet, it won't go away. Because somewhere, deep down, we like to believe that truth can't be silenced. That when a man stands on a pyre and speaks the final word, the world listens. Even if it takes centuries to hear him. Now the wind dies down. The stake is ash. And Jacques de Molay is gone. But not really. You still see him, don't you? In the edge of old books, in the flicker of films, in the pause between myths and history. He's not asking for justice anymore. Got it, he's just watching now, waiting to see what you'll believe. The fire is out. The crowd has gone home. And the ashes of Jacques de Molay are swept quietly into the River Seine. You think the story is over, but it isn't. Because if the Templars were truly gone, if they'd been broken, burned, erased, then you wouldn't be here tonight, would you? You wouldn't be lying there, tucked under your blanket, half asleep but still listening, still wondering. The thing about powerful secrets is, they don't die. They just go underground. And that's exactly where we're going next. Portugal, early 1300s. While France was sharpening its axes and blessing its torches, a quiet little kingdom at the edge of Europe was doing something different. You wouldn't expect Portugal to play a big role here. It was small, a bit of a fringe player in the grand medieval drama. But that's often where history hides. Its most surprising chapters. After the Templars were declared illegal by the Pope and hunted across Europe like animals, many of them fled. Some disguised themselves, some joined other orders, some vanished without a trace. But in Portugal, They were welcomed, and not just in secret in candlelit basements or remote mountain caves. No, they were given land, titles, and a new name. The, Order of Christ. Sounds like a rebrand, doesn't it? Like the Templars took off the old logo, gave it a fresh coat of paint, and walked right back into power through the front door. And you'd be right. King Denis of Portugal, a shrewd and poetic monarch, refused to believe the accusations leveled against the Templars. He knew their value, their discipline, their wealth, their ships, their maps. He also knew that what the Pope demanded and what his kingdom needed were not always the same thing. So he wrote a clever little legal trick. He dissolved the Templar order in Portugal, yes, obeyed the Pope. But just one beat later he created the Order of Christ and appointed former Templars to lead it. Same men, same assets, same castles, new branding, new paperwork, a royal seal of approval. It's like watching a business go bankrupt and reopen the next day with a new sign and the same cashier behind the counter. And here's where it gets even stranger. You've probably heard of Henry the Navigator, right? The Portuguese prince who kicked off the Age of Discovery? The guy whose ships explored the African coast and helped launch the global era of seafaring empires? Yeah, he was the Grand Master of the Order of Christ. Let that sink in. The same organization that rose from the ashes of the Templars, now steering ships into the unknown. Not for Jerusalem, but for gold, spice, and sea routes. And you've probably seen the emblem too. That red cross on a white sail. It's not just decoration. That's the old Templar symbol. Slightly modified, it traveled with Vasco da Gama, with Ferdinand Magellan, with the Portuguese caravels that reached Brazil, India, and beyond. So while most of Europe believed the Templars were dead, their legacy was sailing across oceans, quietly, steadily, redrawing the map of the world. It makes you wonder, what did the Templars really become? Were they explorers now, or something deeper? See, many believe the Order of Christ didn't just preserve Templar leadership, it preserved Templar knowledge, their navigational tools, their secret ports, their strange obsession with sacred geometry and astrological timing, and maybe even something older. Because some say the Templars had maps of places they shouldn't have known. Maps of lands not officially discovered for another 200 years. Crazy? Maybe, but remember, these were men who'd walked every inch of Europe and the Holy Land, who'd built underground vaults, guarded ancient relics, and possibly stolen forbidden manuscripts during the Crusades. They weren't just knights. They were databanks, libraries, and chainmail. And now, thanks to Portugal's legal sleight of hand, they had a fresh start. They were no longer trapped by vows of poverty or landlocked castles. They were free to roam, to trade, to search. And if you believe the whispers, some of them were looking for something specific, something old, something buried, maybe even something not of this world, but that's a tale for another night. For now, just picture the sails, white canvas catching wind, red crosses glowing in the morning sun. Not crusaders anymore, not martyrs, but voyagers. And yet, some say, they still wore rings with the old Templar seal, still whispered the old prayers, still believed in the same strange dream, a world ruled not by kings or popes, but by a hidden order, loyal only to a higher truth. Historians? Oh, they argue endlessly about this. Some say the Order of Christ was just a patriotic navy. Others say it was a phoenix, the rebirth of a secret power disguised as progress. Who's right? That depends on how much faith you put in paperwork and how much you believe in things that refuse to die. The night grows deeper now. The waves of time soften. Portugal fades behind us like the last candle in a stone chapel. But you're left with a thought, aren't you? If the Templars were smart enough to survive destruction, if they sailed west while the rest of Europe thought they were dust, then maybe, just maybe, they're still here. Watching. Waiting. And when the time is right, maybe they'll rise again. Not with swords, but with silence. You're still drifting, aren't you? That place between sleep and story, where facts start to feel like dreams, and dreams whisper back, but what if? Let's stay there a little longer. Because even after kings died, popes changed, and crusades became footnotes. One thing never really faded: the myth of the Templars. And like all the best myths, it refused to behave. You'd think a military order burned at the stake and disbanded would stop showing up in weird places. But no. In dusty manuscripts, in secret tunnels beneath chapels, in conspiracy documentaries at 2 a.m., the Templars pop up again and again like a forgotten password you're convinced you once knew. Why? Because they left behind more than castles and crosses. They left behind questions, and nothing keeps people awake at night quite like a good old-fashioned unanswered question. Let's start with a fun one. Did the Templars ever find the Holy Grail? Oh, come on. Don't roll your eyes just yet. It's not that far-fetched when you think about it. These were men stationed in Jerusalem for almost 2 centuries. Their headquarters was literally built over the ruins of the Temple of Solomon. They had time, motive, and a suspicious amount of digging equipment, and legend has it, they were doing more than just renovating. Some say they found ancient scrolls down there. Others whisper about a stone tablet or a mysterious chest carried away under cover of darkness. And yes, some claim they found the Grail itself. Not a shiny golden cup, but something stranger. A container, yes, but also a code. A relic encoded with ancient knowledge, maybe even pre-Christian secrets that could upend the whole structure of church power if revealed. Now, are there historians who scoff at that? Absolutely. Are there tourists every year poking around Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland because of these stories? Also, absolutely. You might have heard that name. Rosslyn. It's like Disneyland for Templar conspiracy theorists. Strange carvings. Pagan. Symbols. A choir loft that hums like a wine glass when the wind is just right. And then there's that staircase. Winding. Symbolic. Leading down. To something. Of course, the official tour says it leads nowhere. Just some old masonry. Definitely no hidden vault with sacred relics behind the wall. But when you're standing there with the stone cold beneath your hand and the air thick with incense and candle wax, you might not believe them. You might feel something else. You might even hear it, in hoc signo vinces. In this sign, you will conquer, that old Templar motto. Latin etched into their swords, their shields, and possibly the walls of their secrets. And if you think the Grail's the only rumor floating around, oh, buckle up, because it gets weirder. Some say the Templars guarded the Ark of the Covenant. Yep, that Ark. The one with the 10 Commandments, thunderbolts, and uncomfortable Nazis in Indiana Jones movies. The idea is simple. If they were poking around under Solomon's temple, and if the Ark had been hidden during the Babylonian siege, well, what if they found it? And what if they didn't destroy it, but moved it? Some believe it was spirited away to Ethiopia, hidden in a remote monastery guarded by silent monks. Others think it's buried under the Cathedral of Chartres in France, a church the Templars helped design, with geometry so precise it makes your GPS blush. And then there are the stranger relics still, objects you don't learn about in Sunday school. Like the Head of Wisdom, a mysterious talking skull said to have given the Templars secret knowledge, or the Shroud of Turin, which some believe the Templars held long before it appeared in Italy. That's the cloth said to bear the image of Christ's face. Science says maybe. Mystics say definitely. The Vatican says, next question please. It's almost too much to sort through, isn't it? You can feel it already, the web pulling tighter, because, with every rumor, with every sacred object supposedly passed hand to hand beneath torchlight, the Templars start to feel less like a lost order and more like keepers, curators of a hidden museum the world never got to see. And the thing is, people keep finding things. In Spain, a buried chapel with Templar markings on the walls. In Poland, a sword inscribed with the Templar cross, found in a lake no less, like some knightly version of Excalibur. And in modern-day Oak Island, off the coast of Nova Scotia, a bizarre pit filled with booby traps and strange wooden platforms, allegedly built by, guess who? Let's just say if you're ever rich and bored, there's a whole cable TV show waiting for you to join the hunt. But why do these stories stick? Because deep down, you know they're possible, not proven, not confirmed, but possible. The Templars weren't wiped out in a day. They were wealthy, connected, resourceful. If anyone could smuggle something priceless across continents and centuries, it was them. And maybe, just maybe, they did it not out of greed, but out of fear. Fear that the wrong hands would twist. These relics, use them, sell them, break the world apart with knowledge too heavy for its spine. So the Templars vanished, and they buried the truth in stories, in symbols, in the cracks between pages of history books. And now here you are, hundreds of years later, lying in the dark, listening to a voice whisper about maps and skulls and glowing chalices, and part of you wonders, if you reached under your, bed right now, would your fingers graze stone, carved with an ancient sign, waiting for the right person to lift it? No? Good. Keep those hands under the blanket. It's safer there, because some relics aren't meant to be found. Not yet. Not until the world is ready. But you, dreamer, you're getting closer. You've stepped over the line between history and myth. And the trail ahead? It only gets stranger from here. So go ahead, drift deeper. We've only just started unearthing what was buried. You're still with me, aren't you? Good. That's brave of you. Not everyone sticks around after a story starts whispering secrets through the cracks of history. But here you are, listening closer, leaning in. You followed the trail through, castles and crypts, through betrayals and burning stakes, and yet, somehow, you have this lingering feeling, this can't be how it ends. A few confessions, a Friday the 13th bonfire, and poof, the most powerful military order in Christendom just disappears? It doesn't sit right. And guess what? You're not alone. Because, ever since that fateful night in 1307 when King Philip's men kicked down the doors and rounded up the Templars like cattle, one question has echoed louder than any official record. Did they actually get them all? Or did some escape? Picture it. The Knights are warned hours, or even days in advance, because not everyone in France liked Philip. Some were loyal to the Templars. Others just hated paperwork and thought mass arrests sounded exhausting. So maybe a whisper reaches the right ear in Paris, or a coded message rides by horseback from a friendly bishop, and before the king's soldiers even finish their breakfast, the smartest, richest, most secretive men in Europe are already packing up and disappearing into the mist. Sound too romantic? Maybe. But then explain this. The fleet. The Templar fleet. That mysterious group of ships reportedly docked at La Rochelle, a bustling Templar-owned port on the French coast. According to more than one account, just days before the arrests, those ships vanished. No trace, no cargo, no goodbye notes carved into the pier. Just gone. And if that doesn't tickle your curiosity, you might be immune to mystery. Because this wasn't just a dinghy or two bobbing around the harbor. This was a full-fledged naval fleet, the kind that could sail across oceans or disappear into the fog like ghost ships. So, where did they go? Some say Scotland. It wasn't exactly a popular travel destination back then, unless you liked rain, rebellion, and angry Englishmen. But it had one thing the Templars desperately needed. A king who didn't care what the Pope thought. Robert the Bruce had already been excommunicated, which is basically like being unfriended by the Vatican on medieval Facebook. If anyone would take in a few well-trained knights with deep pockets and no political strings, it was him. And strangely enough, not long after 1307, Scotland's military strategies got suspiciously clever, almost like someone had taught them how to fight. Like Templars, coincidence? Maybe, but it's not the only theory. Others claim the Templars fled to Portugal, where they rebranded faster than a celebrity caught in a scandal. There, they became the Order of Christ. New name, same vibe. And under the protection of King Dennis, they flourished. You heard that right. Flourished. They got new lands, new clothes, and eventually, new ships. Ships that would later be used by none other than Prince Henry the Navigator. You know, the guy who jump-started the age of exploration. So, technically, if you follow the breadcrumbs, the same people who once guarded the Holy Land also helped discover new worlds. You weren't expecting that, were you? But wait, there's one more path. One more whispered trail that leads out of La Rochelle and into something far more ambitious. across the Atlantic. Yes, some believe the Templars sailed west. Centuries before Columbus was a twinkle in his mapmaker's eye to where that's the murky part. Some point to Nova Scotia, that chilly Canadian peninsula now famous for its mysterious Oak Island. Remember the pit we talked about? The one with booby traps, coconut fibers, and a suspicious amount of non-native stonework? Well, guess what one of the earliest carved symbols found there was? A cross, with flared arms, just like the Templars used. Is it definitive proof? Of course not. Is it enough to make you raise an eyebrow in the dark? Definitely. And really, that's the essence of the escape theory. No one can prove it. No one can disprove it. It just hangs there, like a thread on a sweater. Tug it, and the whole history starts to unravel. Because if the Templars did survive, if they took their relics, their knowledge, and their gold, and vanished into the folds of time, then maybe they didn't just disappear. Maybe they evolved. Into what? That's a question for another night. But you've heard the theories. Secret societies, banking networks, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, a handful of billionaire yacht clubs with suspicious initiation. Rituals, it's all possible. Because the Templars weren't just knights in white tunics. They were engineers, sailors, architects, financiers, linguists, spies, and if anyone had the means to hide in plain sight for centuries, well, you're already imagining it, aren't you? The candlelit room, the ancient map, a ring passed down for generations with a symbol only a few would recognize. And somewhere, deep beneath a forgotten church or hidden behind a false wall, a voice whispers, "We are still here. It's probably just your imagination." Probably. Still, doesn't it feel like someone has been quietly steering history from the shadows, leaving little signs, building cathedrals with impossible geometry, carving clues into stone for anyone brave or sleepy enough to notice? But don't worry, you don't have to solve it tonight. You just have to rest. Let the idea settle in your chest like a warm secret. That maybe, just maybe, not everything was lost in the flames. Some things escaped, some things survived, and maybe some things are waiting for you. You're drifting now, somewhere between waking and dreaming. But hold on, just for a few more breaths, because tonight's tale is slipping into even murkier waters. You've followed nights across deserts and oceans. You've listened to rumors swirl like smoke around missing fleets and secret landings. But now we're going beneath it all. Not physically, don't worry, no scuba gear required. But symbolically, spiritually, maybe even magically. Because if the Templars escaped the flames, if they really did vanish into the folds of history, then what exactly did they take with them? Swords? Gold? Ancient maps? Sure, maybe. That's the easy stuff. But what if they also carried something far stranger? Tonight, you peer into one of the darkest, most controversial theories. The Holy Grail. Yes, that Holy Grail. And no, it's not a golden goblet sitting on a velvet pillow somewhere, waiting for Indiana Jones to pick it up with trembling hands. At least, probably not. You're going to hear a lot of versions of the Grail story. Some say it's the cup used at the Last Supper. Others claim it caught the blood of Christ at the crucifixion. Some even whisper it's not a physical object at all, but knowledge, a code, a lineage, a truth so big it could crack the church in half like an overripe peach. And the Templars? They were obsessed with it. At least that's what the clues suggest. They built churches with strange symbols, serpents swallowing their tails, men with wings, stars hidden in the floor tiles. They chose building sites aligned with constellations, solstices, and who knows what else. And their rituals? Oh, they were secretive, mysterious. Some say blasphemous, others say sacred in ways the church couldn't control. All of this might sound like a Netflix series gone wild. But keep this in mind. The Templars weren't just warriors, they were seekers, and the Holy Grail, whatever form it took, wasn't just treasure. It was truth, the kind you protect, the kind you bury under layers of stone, metaphor, and blood, oaths. Let's rewind for a second. The earliest stories of the Grail appear around the same time the Templars were rising to power. Coincidence? You've heard that word before. And the Templars? They had access to ancient texts, languages long forgotten, scrolls pulled from the burning libraries of the East. They camped in the ruins of Solomon's Temple for 9 years. Not sightseeing, digging, looking. You remember Solomon's Temple, don't you? The place where legends say the Ark of the Covenant once rested. And what better hiding place for something as dangerous as divine truth? No wonder they were called heretics. No wonder their enemies wanted them erased, because if the Templars did find the Grail, or something Grail-like, it wouldn't have been a shiny cup in a display case. It would have been power. The kind that shakes kingdoms and makes popes lose sleep. And here's where the whispers get louder. Some believe the Templars didn't just find the Grail, they understood it. And when they escaped France, they took that understanding with them, encoded it, protected it. Some even say they passed it on to other groups, other orders, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, even secret bloodlines. You're probably wondering how a cup or an idea could survive for centuries like that. But you'd be surprised how long a symbol can live. Longer than kings, longer than empires, even longer than bedtime stories whispered in the dark. Take Rosslyn Chapel, for instance, a small, oddly designed church in Scotland, built 100 years after the Templars' fall. Its walls are covered in carvings, some Christian, some pagan, some, well, no one's quite sure. One column in particular is said to mark the burial of something, not a person, an object. Visitors report a strange sense of pressure in the air, near it. Some claim to hear whispers. One guy reportedly dropped his phone there and picked it up with his contacts rearranged. Okay, maybe not that last one, but you get the idea. Even Da Vinci couldn't resist the myth. You've seen the books, the movies, the idea that the Holy Grail is a woman, a bloodline, a secret about Mary Magdalene, long buried by patriarchy and polished marble. It's controversial. It's cinematic. But the Templars? They were surrounded by rumors like that. Not because they started them, but because they were there. They knew things, and they knew how to keep secrets. So what do you think? Did they stumble onto something they weren't supposed to find? Or were they always meant to carry the Grail forward, quietly, in the shadows, so that one day it could re-emerge? Not to spark a war, but to offer a choice. To believe, or not. It's a lot to consider, I know. But don't worry, you don't have to decide tonight. Just let it settle behind your eyes, like the last flicker of a candle. Picture this: a chamber, deep beneath a ruined chapel. Dust floating like galaxies in a shaft of moonlight. And in the center, something small, old, radiant. Not a cup, not a map, but a truth. Waiting. Just for you. You're deeper now. The air is heavier, like velvet across your skin. Even the quiet hum in your room feels distant, hushed, respectful. Because tonight, your footsteps echo not through chapels or castle ruins, but through marble halls of power, the kind lit by chandeliers and diplomacy, where men don't wear armor but silk, and yet the battles they fight, just as ruthless. You're entering the modern world, but don't worry, you don't have to check your email. Just keep breathing. We've followed the Templars from sacred wars to whispered secrets, from relics and myths to hidden chambers and missing ships, and yet somehow they're still here. Not in red crosses and white cloaks, those are gone, but in symbols, in rituals, in men who meet in windowless rooms behind locked doors and talk about, well, us. The Templars may have fallen, but something rose in their place. You've heard the name before? Whispered like a punchline in conspiracy videos. The Freemasons. Now here's where it gets interesting. Nobody's saying the Freemasons are the Templars. But if you poke around long enough, if you sift through the Latin inscriptions, the all-seeing eyes, the unfinished pyramids, it starts to feel like a cosmic rebranding. And suddenly you're wondering, why do the highest offices in history keep bumping into Masonic handshakes? Why are architects and presidents and astronauts all part of the same fraternal club? that meets in private, wears aprons, and swears oaths. You don't want to be paranoid. You just want to fall asleep. But the patterns don't lie. Let's rewind the clock again, but not too far this time. Just to 1717 London. A group of men gather and say, "Let's form a grand lodge." Seems innocent enough, but many of them claim to come from older traditions, and their earliest rituals, filled with references to Solomon's Temple. Sound familiar? The very spot where the original Templars began their search, digging under the ruins, chasing mysteries. Now here we are again, centuries later. Different. Robes. Same blueprints. You start to see a thread winding through time. Not a rope, but something thinner, more delicate, like silk or spiderweb. The Freemasons rose just as Europe was changing, fast. Monarchies were shaking. Science was challenging faith. People were asking questions they weren't supposed to ask. And who better to guide that chaos than men trained in secret thought? They called themselves builders. But not just of buildings, of societies. They were the architects of revolutions. Some say literally. Let's talk about one you might know. The American Revolution. The Founding Fathers, many of them were Freemasons. Washington, Franklin, Paul Revere, not just rebels, initiates. And what do we see in their new republic? An unfinished pyramid. An eye that watches. Latin phrases about new orders and hidden powers. It's like a symphony of ancient echoes. Some say the revolution wasn't just political, it was philosophical. A continuation of a mission that started long before Boston Tea Parties. A mission about freedom, yes, but also knowledge, the kind that gets buried and then unearthed at just the right moment. You might be wondering, if the Freemasons carried the Templar spark, where is it now? Well, that's the thing. It's everywhere, and nowhere. You'll find their lodges in nearly every major city. Their buildings blend into the skyline, ordinary from the outside. But inside, it's candlelight, wooden gavels, stars painted on ceilings, no phones, no press, just whispered words and ancient signs. Of course, most Masons will tell you it's all symbolic, that the rituals are tradition, not secrets, that they're more about charity and brotherhood than global domination. And they might be right. But the thing about secrets? The best ones are hidden in plain sight, and you, dear listener, are now fluent in the art of noticing. You've traced symbols across tombstones. You've heard stories about grails and maps and treasure fleets. You've seen how power doesn't just vanish, it adapts. Which brings us to one final twist tonight. Some researchers, quiet ones, the kind who don't tweet, believe the Templars never vanished at all. They rebranded, changed names, split into branches. One became the Masons. Another drifted into banking. Another cloaked itself in religion, diplomacy, or yes, even entertainment. Because the true treasure wasn't gold. It was influence. You don't need swords when you have symbols. You don't need fortresses when you control the narrative. And as you lie there, surrounded by soft shadows and the slow ticking of a nearby clock, you start to wonder how much of our modern world was quietly shaped by men who called each other brother in candlelit rooms. How many laws, cities, ideas were sparked by the aftershocks of the Templars. How many passwords, initiation rites, or even just phrases carry meanings you've never noticed. It's okay. You're not supposed to figure it all out tonight. The point isn't certainty, it's awareness. A quiet knowing that beneath every stone is a story. And beneath that story, maybe a symbol, maybe a secret handshake, or maybe just a whisper saying, keep looking. But not now. Now it's time to drift. Let the marble halls fade away. Let the whispers turn into silence. And as your breathing slows and your limbs sink heavier into the bed, you remember, the Templars may be gone. But their legacy? Still, building one quiet brick at a time. You're almost at the end of this journey, though it doesn't quite feel like an end, does it? Because stories like this, about knights, secrets, and shadows, have a way of lingering in the corners of your mind long after the last word fades. You've walked through centuries of whispers, traced symbols carved in stone, and followed invisible threads tying past to present. And now, as you settle deeper under your covers, I want to take you just a little further, into the quiet twilight of this tale. The Knights Templar, those mysterious warriors cloaked in legend, were more than just crusaders in shining armor. They were pioneers of an idea, a complex web of faith, power, and secrecy that stretched far beyond their dramatic downfall. And just like your favorite bedtime story, they didn't disappear. They transformed, from dusty battlefields to secret chambers, from cloistered monks to powerful influencers. Their legacy seeped into the very fabric of history. You've seen how their symbols flutter through the ages, appearing in the unlikeliest places, on banknotes, government buildings, even in the language of ritual and ceremony. Some say they were protectors of holy relics. Others whisper about buried treasure, or coded maps pointing to untold secrets. And many historians still debate what really happened in those cold dungeons when the final chapter was written. But here's what I think. The true magic of the Templars isn't in the gold or the conspiracies. It's in the stories we tell ourselves, about courage, faith, and the quest for knowledge. Because beneath the armor and the myths, there's a very human tale of ambition and survival, of men trying to make sense of a chaotic world. You might be wondering, as your eyelids grow heavier, why we're still so fascinated, centuries later. Why these knights who vanished overnight keep casting such long shadows. Maybe it's because their story mirrors something inside all of us. The yearning to find meaning, to be part of something greater, to guard a secret that only we know. Or perhaps it's just the thrill of a mystery left unsolved, an invitation to imagine what lies beyond the veil of history. Whatever it is, it's enough to keep us whispering their names in the quiet hours, to keep drawing maps in our minds that lead to hidden places, and to keep the story alive, not as a legend frozen in the past, but as a living, breathing puzzle. So as you sink deeper into sleep, picture the moonlight casting silver shadows on ancient stones. Hear the faint rustle of pages turning in a forgotten library. Feel the soft weight of history resting gently on your chest. And remember, the greatest secrets are often the ones that help us dream. In this stillness, let the stories of the Templars fade like a soft melody. Their swords lower, their banners settle. The whispers become a lullaby. No need to solve the mysteries tonight. No need to chase the shadows. Just rest. Let your breath slow. Let your mind drift. The past will be here when you wake, waiting, patiently. Until then, sleep well, dream deep. And know that in the quietest moments, the stories we carry keep us connected, across time, across space, across the ages. End of script. Sweet dreams.